What's up, gunfighters? Are you into the uber tactical? The latest and greatest in black rifles? If it's not HK416, it ain't nothing. Maybe a Daniel Defense Mark 18 is permissible. Maybe if you're slumming it that day. And quad rails, I mean, they're so early aughts. It's gotta be M-Lock. Well, this episode's probably not for you. We're talking about the Marlin Model 60. Unless you're like me and you like all aspects of guns, right? The Marlin Model 60 is a great gun. Perhaps one of the least tactical guns. Well, maybe not. I mean, you could argue like a Derringer or something, but it's not a tactical gun for sure. Probably somebody out there has redneckified one to make it as tactical as possible, but it is not a tactical gun. But it's a great 22, the Marlin Model 60. That's what we're going to talk about today. So, saddle up for gunfighter life, where we talk about guns, gunfighting tactics, the right way, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. God is at the center of everything that I do, and this podcast is no different. I'm not going to put in a bio today, because we're talking about the Marlin Model 60, right? I mean, I'll talk a little bit about my childhood, but, I mean, really, if we're talking about the Marlin Model 60, so other than demonstrating shooting familiarity, I don't know what being a combat veteran would have to do with the Marlin Model 60. So let's talk about this. And this is going to come from what I think that I know, because I could be wrong on any of these facts, right? By the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, a matter is established. There we go, to having God at the center again. By the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. So I'll be using my own knowledge of the Marlin Model 60, or what I think I know. Also Wikipedia, because it's easy. Right? So let's talk about the Marlin Model 60. In my opinion, the Marlin Model 60 is perhaps the most, well, I can't think of anything better. I can think of other ones as good, but I can think of nothing better. I can think of no better 22 rifle for small game hunting. We're talking small game. Rabbits, squirrels. If it's legal where you are, in many places it's not, but it is here in Idaho for some upland game birds. Things like that, right? Prairie dogs, whistle pigs, cottontails, jackrabbits, fox in the hen house. You get the idea. Again, we're not talking tactical. We're not talking about taking on a bunch of murdering, kidnapping, cowardly Hamas thugs, right? We're talking about small game hunting rifle. And for that, the Marlin Model 60, it's a beauty, right? It's just a good small game hunting gun. If I put this in military vernacular, like shoulder fire, box magazine fed, like you would with the M16 or the M4, let me put it in that kind of nomenclature for you. It is a shoulder fired 22 caliber, 22 long rifle caliber, tube magazine fed, semi-automatic, iron sight, leaf sight. Different versions had different capacity, but let's just say 18 rounds. Firearm. It is perhaps, and it maybe not even be second, because I think they didn't stop making it until 2020. But I would imagine that by now the 1022 has eclipsed it in total sales. I could be wrong on that. It is probably in the top 2. It is either probably first or second of the most produced model of 22 rifle ever produced by humans, right? That's a enormous feat. I believe, and I haven't pulled this up yet to read from Wikipedia on this episode, but I believe it's called the Marlin Model 60 because it was designed in 1960. The Marlin Model 60. Marlin, I don't know if all the models had this, because I know that Marlin sadly got bought up and it was produced in different places, but historically, a lot of these older Marlins were known for their micro-groove rifling. They touted that. Now, micro-groove rifling, much like hexagonal rifling, like in a Glock or an HK, can have some disadvantages, but micro-groove rifling can also have some big advantages. And they were kind of known, whether it had to do with the micro-groove rifling specifically, or just because it was good quality steel, good quality barrel, good quality control, They were known for being accurate, both in their big boy like lever action guns like a Marlin 336 or the Marlin Model 60. It still had micro groove rifling, and this micro groove rifling had some real benefits. So that is a real benefit to the Marlin Model 60. There are some detriments, but the micro groove rifling is one of the quintessential, I think, Marlin Model 60 things. And again, I'm not sure if every single one had it. Maybe later models went to traditional rifling, but when I think of Marlin Model 60, I think of micro groove rifling. I also think of that tube magazine. Now, I said for small game hunting, for sunny day adventures afield. The tube magazine has some real benefit for this application. Okay, you can't lose your magazine. And I think wisely the old school Ruger 1022, like the one that I still have from when I was a boy, thank the Lord that one was not stolen, it has a flush magazine release, which is a really good design for being in the field. It's flush and nothing sticks out, which is nice, but also nothing's going to hit it. Well, it'd be really hard for something to hit it and drop that magazine out, but it's still possible. One of the benefits to that tube magazine is that it's right there under the barrel, so it doesn't really add much to the profile of the gun. Also, you can't lose magazines because the magazine is part of the gun. Now, I suppose you could, because if you don't know how a tube magazine works, you have this long hollow tube and you have another long hollow tube with a spring-loaded follower in there, and you take that out. I guess it would be possible to lose that, but it's so long that I imagine you would notice if it started coming out of the gun. I don't think that's a common problem, unless you intentionally took it out and left it behind, which is certainly possible, but that's a big benefit, where you can't drop and lose the magazine. If you're just grabbing the gun and go out and hunt, that's a big benefit. Also, 18 round capacity. If you're talking about field hunting, like going to hunt squirrels and rabbits, which is something I grew up doing and something that I thoroughly enjoy doing, 18 rounds. And it doesn't stick out of the bottom of the gun. Much like if you can get higher capacity magazines for magazine-fed guns, but they stick out so far that it can hinder your fieldcraft, your spot and stalk ability, or running through trees and brush and stuff like that. That tube magazine is, I think, a better design for that application with that high capacity. It's not as quick to reload, but it's fine for field use. You shoot a couple of rounds at a squirrel or a running rabbit, you go pick up said rabbit, and you top off your magazine. Right? It's a good field design. It has disadvantages, right? If you run it empty, it takes quite a while to reload. Again, would not consider this a great. It's a small game field gun. That was what it was designed for, and that's what it's good at. I'm not saying it's better for other applications, but for that, it is a good design. Let's look at what Wikipedia has to say. Give credit where credit is due. Let's look at Wikipedia. The Marlin Model 60, also known as the Marlin Glenfield Model 60, semi-automatic rifle that fires a 22 long rifle rimfire cartridge, produced by Remington Arms in Huntsville, Alabama, formerly Mayfield, Kentucky, formerly by Marlin Firearms Company of New Haven, Connecticut. It was in continuous production from 1960 to 2020. And the company says it is the most popular rifle of its kind in the world. Again, this is a little bit dated because kind of the sad history of Marlin is it got sold and bought again. It's no longer owned. Marlin is not owned by Remington. It's owned by Ruger now. And they have not yet, to my knowledge, started producing Marlin Model 60s again, if they will. Because obviously their big competitor, the Marlin Model 60, was a Ruger 1022. So now Marlin is owned by Ruger. So I don't know if they'll produce the Model 60 because that would compete with their Ruger 1022, which they already own. And I guess this is a standard model. They made a lot of sub-variants, a lot of sub-variants. 5.5 pounds. It says produced over 11 million. That's quite an achievement. Variants, the 60, 60C. Anyway, I'm not going to go through down the whole line. That would just be poor audio. There's a lot of different variants. One of the coolest variants I ever saw, and it was cheap, and I probably should have bought it. It was sitting on a gun rack at a gun store that dealt in a lot of used guns. In fact, I was the manager of that gun store. I tried to stay away from buying guns that came in and out just for conflict of interest. But this gun just sat there, and there was a bunch of Model 60s came in and out of there. But this one was a short stainless model. And it was beautiful and handy and tiny. And I already was kind of settled on the 1022, but it was just such a cool gun. I probably should have bought it because again, it's a good gun for just going out in the field and small game hunting. So it's a variant of that. Also, not a variant of the Model 60, but they also made the Marlin Model 70, which if you like the box magazine kind of thing, you might look into that. They also made not exactly the same, but similar models, micro-groove rifling, and if you like things about the Marlin, they made a bolt action as well. They may have made a bolt action tube feed, but I'm fairly certain they made a bolt action box magazine fed with that micro-groove rifling and a similar aroma to the Marlin Model 60. And then also similar guns were produced. Again, they talked about Glenfield, but I think probably Sears and maybe Western Auto or some other guns may have been produced very similar. Maybe even produced by, and I'm not sure about this, but produced very similarly that you might be able to get for even cheaper prices. Anyway, to wrap it up, the Marlin Model 60. Just mass produced. You talk about a success in mass production for civilian American firearms ownership. Just a wildly successful 22 rifle. And although in history it kind of lost out, I think, to the 1022, and I think rightfully so, you might disagree, but it's still an amazing gun. It's still a really good gun. Talking about my childhood, my best friend growing up, and we did a lot of hunting, probably a lot of hunting we weren't supposed to be doing, if I'm being completely honest, but we killed a lot of stuff. And he grew up with the Marlin Model 60. He had a Marlin Model 60, and I had a Ruger 1022, which I still have and love. But he still has and loves his Marlin Model 60. Maybe it's one of those kind of Ford versus Chevy things. But it's a good gun. I will concede that, even though I like the Ruger 1022. But it is a very good gun. It's a very good 22. And not for everything. It's not my first choice for a lot of things. But I can't think of anything better. I didn't say there weren't other ones just as good, but I can't think of anything better for field hunting of small game than the Marlin Model 60. With that, a short episode, no tactical tip today. Oh, almost postscript. One of the things you may find lackluster on the Marlin Model 60, not to end it on a bad note, but it was good for its time. It has that, and I think it's a 3/8 just rail on the top built into the receiver. And I think now today there are much better, more modern options like its big rival, the 1022. It comes drilled in taps. So you can use modern scope mount, many modern scope mounts. You can use modern rails, what's become like the standard 1913 or Picatinny, whatever, or Picatinny, however you want to pronounce it, rail system. It'll use that. The Marlin Model 60 uses in my opinion, antiquated, not obsolete, but obsolescent rail mounting system. So there is that. Anyway, let's wrap this up. The tactical verse of the day. Oh, it's a good one. Let us lay aside every weight and sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. It doesn't even need anything. I don't even need to expound on that. Just a great verse. Have a blessed day.